Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the special Ramadan edition of the Focus and Finance Show. I'm your host Shafiq Morton. As always, it's great to be with you. During the shows this month, we've been talking about sustainable investment, and last week we spoke about the habits of sustainable investors. This week we're going to talk about the fruits of those who've indulged in sustainable investment, particularly during their retirement years. Joining us in studio today is Zahrah Cachalia and Ebrahim Rawoot. Guys, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam, Shafiq.
Ebrahim, habits have changed quite a lot in terms of retirement. When people reach their autumn years, they are retiring, going into other careers, they're studying, and they're even jumping off cliffs with parachutes. Tell us something about how do we plan for a sustainable future in terms of a retirement, etc., etc.
I think, Shafiq, it's important that you're mentioning those examples. And, being an avid runner, I've seen, this change of people that generally thought their place was in the kitchen to now being on the road. And, some of them are running half marathons and marathons. And I think this is the beauty of, retirement. It just opens up many doors for you. But all of that probably just involves a lot more planning. And I think, that is where it really becomes important for you as individuals to be able to say, well, I'm about crossing that line to retirement, and what I need to have done to be able to ensure that I'm going to be able to retire comfortably and have that security of being able to take care of myself during my retirement years. So, Shafiq, as you reach your late 40s and probably your early 50s, that trend and that phase in your life is probably the phase that you're going to carry through into your retirement. And you would have probably achieved a certain or even a few milestones in your life. Some of those milestones could be, the fact that your bond probably would have been paid up by then. Your children are now probably completing their schooling career and, you're setting them up for their retirement. And then, one or two other things could be, for example, your kids are getting married. But these are certain milestones that we have to plan and prepare for. You're not just going to have a situation where I retire, but I need to still worry about education for my children or even my grandchildren. So when do we start? And I think, that's probably the critical point. The best part of this whole exercise is that while it's never too late to start, the beauty of it is starting as early as earning your first salary. Now, for myself as an example, whether it was a weekend job or being, an article clerk trainee or even doing your community service or in-service, I think, your first salary is that salary that you start taking a portion of that money and start contributing it to maybe a retirement annuity or even a tax-free savings product. And, the spectrum of products out there is just, overwhelming. But this is where we guide you to be able to say, these are the products available. Start as early as possible in order to ensure that you are going to secure yourself a nest egg for you to be able to enjoy. And during the discussions going ahead, we'll be able to tap a little bit more into that.
No, absolutely. Now, Zahrah, Ebrahim has emphasized the great need for planning. But once we've planned, how do we ensure that we can enjoy this quality of lifestyle, especially during retirement?
Sure. Thank you, Shafiq. So as Ebrahim's highlighted, retirement planning follows very closely to the kind of lifestyle you're leading in your late 40s and especially going into your 50s. The important thing to consider when you're going into your retirement years is that you should be following the 80% rule around retirement. What this means is that 80% of the amount that you're spending in your 50s should be the benchmark for what you will want to earn in your retirement years. So let's look at an example. Dr. Dokrat is a doctor and currently earning 100,000 Rand every month. With this amount, he sees to his wife, his aunt that stays with him, and himself. He's fortunate that all his children are married and have moved out of the house, so really he's earning to ensure that him and his two immediate dependents are taken care of. Everyone is in good health, he owns his house, and he has a good savings plan, so he's in a great position. He enjoys a vacation annually, and he continues to save his money into his investment accounts. He also saves for his grandchildren, making it easier for them to afford an education in the years to come. When he retires, assuming all else remains the same and no one gets sick, Dr. Dokrat will then need about 80,000 Rand per month to maintain his current lifestyle. Now, the 80% rule is not a hard rule. It's a guideline, and it gives investors a benchmark as to what to plan for in their retirement. The last thing you want is for your retirement years to be financially unaffordable for yourself. So that would be devastating for anyone. And imagine not being able to do the things you enjoy doing today because you did not save enough and you did not plan adequately for your retirement years. So we give investors a guideline. 80%, that's the benchmark. But everyone is different, and you need to adjust your savings target based on your personal needs and your personal requirements.
Now, Ebrahim, obviously now Zahrah has spoken about the fact that we're all different, 80% benchmark, but what are the considerations that you assess when we retire in terms of us all being different?
Yeah, I think, there's so many considerations that one should actually be looking at. But, let's highlight a few of them. And I think, these are probably the more important ones in order to ensure a financial well-being individual at the end of the day. So I think probably the most important question is, when do you plan on retiring? I think some people after their first month at work would like to believe they're ready to retire. But I think, on a more realistic front, you could use the guideline of what the industry allows for. And many of your company or corporate pension schemes, forces you to retire at even as late as 65 years of age. But I think while I'm using the word late, we need to be realistic to the fact that many individuals are now living longer, they're living healthier lifestyles. We have far better medical facilities today available to us than what we had 100 years ago. So while 65 is that guideline, we should all be using that as a measurement tool to say, how much do I need to save in order to achieve that target? Now, no two individuals are alike. I mean, if it was, I think life would be pretty boring. But, I think the guideline that we need to use is that whether you're a doctor, and maybe use Dr. Dokrat as an example, he's self-employed, he's a general practitioner, maybe as an example. So his option to be able to continue working goes beyond 65. He's his own boss at the end of the day. But take, for example, a nurse. She works with the Department of Health. She's going to be bound by the rules that at maybe 63 or 65, she's forced to retire. So while we have that end in mind, I think we have this sufficient opportunity to be able to say, well, I'm 25 years of age, my end date is 65, and this is what I need to be able to achieve that target. So I think the first consideration is, when do I intend on retiring? And then secondly is, looking at the spending habits of individuals. Everyone is different. Zahrah might, put a bigger emphasis on maybe, clothing and, makeup.
Never.
And then, someone like yourself, Shafiq, you might say, well, the value of a surfboard is a lot more important.
Absolutely.
But that's the beauty of life. Everyone is just so different. And that's what makes this consideration probably more important. But, the spending habits that you have, if I want to continue that through my retirement years, again, what do I need to do in order to ensure that I'm going to be able to achieve that? And then I think the third one, and I think it's an important one, is healthcare. At the beginning of the show, we spoke about how healthy people are living, the healthy lifestyles and the good habits they've developed. And I think those good habits they've developed before their retirement is what they're carrying through. If we look after ourselves, medical and healthcare should not be that big a problem. But, we don't know. There are unfortunate events that do take place, and we need to ensure that we care for that eventuality. And healthcare is going to become an expensive item when you do retire. And then the fourth one, and I think maybe the unknown of all this, is the unknown expenses that's going to incur. Do I wake up one morning and say to my spouse, let's go on a holiday? if that's what I want to do and that's the lifestyle that I want to enjoy, I need to make provision for that. So the 80% rule, and yes, we have to emphasize that it's not a hard, fast rule, but I think it's a very good guideline that we can implement into our daily life in order to ensure that we have a secured nest egg for ourselves. And, if you want to have that add-ons in life, then maybe take 80% and make it 90%. The more you're going to save, ultimately, the better the security and well-being of your retirement is going to be.
All right, now, bearing in mind the 80% benchmark, Zahrah, what do we really need to put away in terms of that nest egg that's going to look after us in the future?
So let me start by saying that if you begin saving early, you won't need to cut away large portions of your current earnings as you progress into your career. So if you leave retirement savings to the end of your savings plan and you don't prioritize it, you can be sure that you will need to put away large sums of money every month as you get closer and closer to retirement. And I'm sure, Ebrahim, you will agree with me on this. Not only will late savings result in big contributions to your later years, you'll also not save enough to retire on par with your current lifestyle. And our advisors see it time and again when people during their working lives decide they're going to change jobs or may even go through something as unfortunate as retrenchment. What do? They cash in their retirement funds. And this is probably one of the worst financial decisions you can make in your life. Not only are you losing out on the benefits of compounding, you're also losing out on time itself, which can never be recovered. And for those people, they invariably end up working well past their retirement age, which carries its own set of challenges that you need to prepare to deal with as well. Having said that, I do want to reiterate that for each individual, circumstances are unique and therefore savings plans will be different. At Oasis, we encourage early savings. And once that's in place, we then urge our investors to contribute their full retirement allowance to their savings pool each year. So to give you an idea about how this would work out in practice, let's consider our earlier example of Dr. Dokrat. And assuming he worked for 35 years at his medical practice, and let's say that his average gross salary over this period of time in current terms is approximately 1.5 million rand per year, this would imply that the full advantage of the tax allowance offered, his total contributions to his retirement fund could be about 412,000. However, the maximum allowable contribution per regulation is capped at 350,000, which is tax deductible.
Yeah, I think, Shafiq, and maybe just to add to what Zahrah is mentioning, and I think these are important numbers, but don't let the numbers overwhelm you. I think it's a principle that we need to look at. There are huge tax savings, and we spoke about it in so many other interviews before. The ability to, first of all, claim back money from SARS, and the ability to start early to ensure that the nest egg that you create for yourself is going to be such an amazing, huge amount that's going to allow for financial security. We spoke about one example that, where someone, assuming 24 years of age, is just finding himself in the working field. 2 years later, he decides, let's change jobs. And this is what happens. But you would have accumulated maybe 50, maybe 100,000 in his pension fund. Don't find every reason in the textbook to say, I need to now have access to that money. Because if you take that 100,000 and you just project it, even at a 6% return for the next 30, 35 years, it's going to be well over 3-4 million rand. Now you do that exercise over and over every time you're changing jobs. The ultimate beneficiary of this is going to be you and your family at the end of the day.
Ebrahim, Zahrah has been talking about pre-retirement savings, the importance of saving from an early age, the 80% benchmark. But now, what about something that's called a drawdown once we retired? What does that mean? What is a drawdown?
I think, that's probably going to become one of the important words, when you do retire, because drawdown speaks about how much I'm able to earn as a pension in order to secure my day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month expenses. And, this all forms part of the Long-Term Insurance Act. So there are certain rules and parameters in terms of what the law says. And I think let's start with that first. So the law says when I do retire, a certain percentage of my money I will then take to invest in a living annuity or an investment-linked living annuity. And there's many others, and we'll speak about it in a few minutes. But what the law says, I must draw a minimum of 2.5% of the amount as a pension, and I can't draw more than 17.5% of the amount as a pension. So that's the band that you have to operate within. You can't tell the living annuity, I don't want to earn a pension, and you can't tell the living annuity, I want to earn 20% as a pension. So that's what the law says. I think we have to look at what best practice is. And I think best practice is looking at the portfolio that you're investing in, and generally what has been the returns over the last maybe 1, 3, 5, and let's even look at the last 10 years. So while past return is not an indication of what we're going to get tomorrow, we need to be cautious and prudent to the fact that markets have been difficult, and perhaps look at a recommended best practice rule of between 5 and 6%. Now picture, and you can actually do the math very simply. If I'm drawing 15% as a pension and my pension income return is only 5%, that means 10% is negatively impacting my capital. And before you know it, at 65, I had 5 million rand, and 5 years down the line, I've depleted my capital because I've gone to the extent of drawing more than what the return has been. By drawing that 5 to 6%, you're doing a couple of things. First of all, you're trying in your best interest to be able to protect capital, but you're also trying this long-term objective of growing capital and growing your pension in order to combat inflation. And I think those are the guidelines that we need to be able to use. So, if you take an example of someone that's earned, let's say is investing 5 million rand as a pension fund, minimum 125,000 per annum is what he has to draw. Maximum 875,000 rand. But if you look at drawing a 17.5% pension, your pension could drop to 31,000 rand over a period of probably 6, 7, 8 years. And these numbers are scary. So as an individual, before you even consider retiring, even before you're even contemplating it, speak to your financial advisors so that we can start putting those plans in place to be able to say, I'm going to be short what I need to take as remedial action to be able to ensure all those considerations we mentioned at the beginning is going to be fulfilled. And once we adopt that, I think we're on the path to financial security.
Now, Zahrah, latching onto what Ebrahim is saying, obviously we're withdrawing from our funds at the age of retirement. I think the big question is, how sustainable is that?
Shafiq, that's a very valid concern, and that most investors have. What I want to say is that when you do decide to retire, that's not necessarily the end. People are living longer. Ebrahim alluded to this earlier, and people are living longer and in relatively good condition than maybe 2 to 3 generations before us, where mortality rates were much higher. With better health conditions, as you go into retirement, you save yourself from having to spend excessive amounts of money on health-related expenses, and also depending on your lifestyle, you will be drawing down based on your day-to-day needs. To ensure that you retain savings throughout your lifetime, perhaps you can take up interests that don't require such a lot of spending. For example, you could take up gardening or coordinating a community club program. Now, with the drawdown itself, you will need to purchase a retirement annuity plan that pays you monthly, but this annuity is still exposed to the markets and continues to grow. So the plan you construct with your financial advisor is to ensure that you are not eating away into your capital, but rather that your drawdown rate is sustainable and that you are conservative with the amounts that you withdraw, ensuring that you don't draw down more than what you need, and making sure that you invest wisely and that your funds are generating inflation-beating returns. What's also important is that you need to ensure that your post-retirement portfolio is well diversified. So the same rules apply as pre-retirement savings. Diversification remains key to ensuring that you maximize on your return opportunities by not exposing your funds to any one instrument, sector, currency, or geographic region.
Zahrah mentioned this word diversification, Shafiq, and I think this is so important. I read about it. When we buy property, we always speak about location, location, location. And I think in the world of investing, especially when it comes to your retirement savings, I think we can use that same diversification. And I think that is so important.
Absolutely.
Then there's also the possibility that you decide to continue working. Perhaps not full-time, but some people at 65 are not even close to looking or feeling 65 and may have the energy to do a range of work or even consultations.
Now, Ebrahim, we've also been talking about using the word annuity, retirement annuity. I think the question here is how many people buy into something, I think it's called a guaranteed annuity. Tell us more about that.
I think, a lot more people get comfort from this word called guarantee because they believe everything is going to be secured, it's going to be well. And I think we need to take that word and, maybe just expand it and broad base, give an example of what it's all about.
That's a doctorate again.
And no, I think we can maybe just use a general person that works. But let's take someone that works for the Department of Education or the Department of Health. But remember, the PIC, or the Government Employees Pension Fund, it's the biggest pension fund not only in South Africa but on the African continent. And many of these public servants do contribute to this retirement fund. And eventually when they do retire, they will get a portion of their money in cash, and the balance then remains with the fund, and the fund then pays you a pension. But then there's also, insurance companies that offer guaranteed annuities. And I think, the only guarantee in life, Shafiq, is that we are going to close our eyes. Beyond that, there's absolutely no control. So what a guaranteed living annuity does, it says we will pay you a pension for a defined period in time.
Right.
Now, if you, Shafiq, can determine the day, the month, the time, the year that I'm going to close my eyes, then by all means, let's play this game of guaranteed annuities. But we don't. We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know if there's going to be certain eventualities. Or perhaps, I surprise myself at 65 years of age and I go find more employment. The beauty of this is, and no one individual is the same, that we have to have this flexibility. Secondly, with a guaranteed annuity, you will never have access to your money. You'll never have a decision to say how much I can draw, whether I need a little bit more or whether I don't need that much. There's just absolutely no choice. And then I think very important is the fact that we cannot choose where our monies get invested. Too many a time, whether it is, in our employment years, we contribute to our pension fund. It's our hard-earned savings, but that money is either being contaminated through stocks that are not permissible to you and I. And I think this is the important factor that we need to make note of. So guaranteed annuity is really just guaranteeing you a pension. And that's it. But beyond that, you've absconded all your responsibility. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, but jeepers, am I in that position to be able to do that? Secondly, this is probably going to be your first, maybe your second biggest accumulation of wealth you would have created, probably next to your residential property. So let's look at guaranteed annuities and let's look at the living annuities or the investment-linked living annuities, which even Oasis offers. Here, you have a choice to decide how much I can draw based on those parameters of 2.5% and 17.5%. I can choose a payment date that suits me. I can choose a portfolio that suits my risk profile and my Sharia and ethical requirements. And once a year, I can make changes to that living annuity, which I will not be able to do in a guaranteed living annuity. But I think the important part is what happens after I close my eyes. Does the money go back to the state? Does it go back to the insurance company? In the case of a living annuity, you have that nominated beneficiaries that the monies will go to.
Interesting stuff indeed. Now, Zahrah, in this whole landscape, some of us might think, final question, we might want to create a legacy fund, maybe for our grandchildren or something. How does this affect our retirement funds and our drawdown?
So, Shafiq, with most living annuity contracts, the remaining assets in the fund could be transferred to your beneficiary upon the death of the policyholder. So your nominated beneficiaries, let's say your spouse, would have various options with regards to the remaining benefits. She could either take over the policy in her name, she could take the full benefit in cash, or she could take a portion in cash and leave the rest invested. Similarly, the spouse, who is now the policyholder, assuming she opted to take over the policy, would then have the option of nominating beneficiaries of her own, who too have various options upon her death with regards to the remaining benefits. Hence, you could use this as a form of a legacy fund for the benefit of your family after you have passed on. And this further highlights the need to ensure that you maintain a sustainable and a prudent drawdown rate.
I think, Shafiq, maybe just to add to that, and this is the beauty of a living annuity, by nominating a beneficiary, which you actually have to. When you pass on, this money doesn't form part of your estate, which means you're not paying estate duty, and I think that's a tick in the right box. Number two, you would have nominated people that you would want this monies to go to, and I think that's again another tick in the right box. And then, while you can't force the beneficiaries to choose one or two or three of those options, I think, through an open relationship with your children and your spouse, you want to encourage them already to say, this is the option I would like you to choose when I do pass on. But, at the end of the day, each one has their own requirements. But as financial advisors, we need to engage with the family, not only the policyholder, with the family, that everyone is on the same page. And this is the well wishes of the policyholder. And I think this probably becomes the best legacy that you can leave for yourself, for your spouse to enjoy, for your children to enjoy, for the future generations, being the grandchildren.
Absolutely. Ebrahim and Zahrah, shukran. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shafiq.
And that concludes today's edition of the Oasis Focus and Finance Show. Should you wish to watch this or any of our other shows, you can log into the Oasis Crescent YouTube channel, or you can catch us on LinkedIn. Should you wish to call us, you can dial 0860 100 786 or email info@oasiscrescent.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Shafiq Morton. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Mm-hmm.